Fiona, thank you so much for agreeing to answer these questions today as an experienced supply teacher. So may I ask, first of all, how long have you been a supply teacher for?
On and off, probably around 20 years, because there would have been a couple of years when I wasn't working at all, and I think I started back again, very part-time, sort of occasional, when my second son was just over a year old.
Okay, thank you. And so whereabout in the country are you teaching?
I'm between jobs at the moment because I've just moved house and I'm trying to get my registration as a supply teacher changed over from one place to another. And there's I'm living in the borders now, and I'm trying to get registered with a supply agency south of the border because we're that close. And it's kind of hesitating over complicated documents.
Okay, thank you. There's always something that's in the way when you're trying to transition from one job to the other. I'm sure a lot of people can appreciate that. And do you work primary or secondary schools?
Primary.
Primary level, fantastic. Okay, so all the questions that I'm going to ask you today are from members from various Facebook supply teaching groups. So some of the questions will probably hit a few nerves, I'd imagine, with some supply teachers who are watching this video. You've had a look through some of the preview questions I've sent you, so you'll know what I mean here. So I'll just launch straight into the questions just now, Fiona, if that's okay. So first question is, why might teachers work as supply rather than in a full-time post?
For me personally, it was because I needed to work part-time. I wanted to get back to work gradually, see how my children did with it and so on. I think that I mean, obviously, if you have your own class and you're there all the time, certain things run better. But if you've got other life commitment, you've had any level of health problems, so you have limited energies. So, 3 days of teaching kind of puts you into a bit of a decline. The things that you have to do just to keep the job going, I've often felt that you cannot do a day's work in a day. Mm-hmm. And so part-time has to be the way to go for me. Also, it's easier if you've got sort of occasional things like if you suffer health problems, if you've got commitments to other family members and so on. If you're supply teaching, because it's casual, it's easier to take time off, to plan time off for anything for any weeks that you might not be available.
Fantastic. I think you've raised some really important points there, Fiona. Thank you for that. And so I'll move on to our next question just now. So how do you cope with earning approximately £10,000 less a year than contracted teachers for the same work?
I would first of all say that it's not really the same work, because if you are full-time, you've got very heavy paperwork commitments, you've got a lot of liaising with parents that a supply teacher is not that much included in, and it can be, there are a lot of very time-consuming things if you are full-time permanent that supply teachers to some extent don't usually have to do. I mean, obviously there's a supply teacher I've had lengthy parents' evenings and so on, but to be honest, if you're doing occasional supply, you don't usually get to do the long parents' evenings and the serious paperwork. I'm rarely asked for more than a quick summary of what I've done, even if it's long term. So I don't see it as exactly the same workload, but I think one has to decide at some point, you realize your limitations, you realize your family's needs and your relatives' needs and your other outside commitments, and you have to make some hard choices. And if it means living cheaper in order to have more quality of life, then for me, that came easily because I've never been an expensive person.
Okay, I appreciate
And my children aren't expensive, is the point.
Thank you. I appreciate those points you've raised. I suppose some supply teachers have said to me that they don't feel that the agency that control all the supply work for them actually do it in a very ethical or fair manner. And some supply teachers have said, I think somebody actually created their own ethical supply teaching agency. For me personally, I've been a supply teacher for 15 years, and most of that time it's been through agencies. But the last 4 years, it's been through Edinburgh City Council. And I found that they have offered better terms and conditions, you know, for supply teachers. Do you think there's some way forward still that there could be more equity for supply teachers? You know, do you think they're earning what they should reasonably be deserving to earn?
Well, I have been working in Scotland, and so it's not done by agency in Scotland. So I'm not really clearly aware of how big the agency's cut is. I know that some years ago in Scotland, a decision was made to basically halve supply teachers' wages for sort of short-term temporary work. And that did hit supply teachers quite hard. But it just, at the time, it just meant, okay, try and get more continuous work, and then you go up to a better wage.
Yes.
So because I'm sort of not living on a very tight wage, on a very tight budget, then I just live cheaply, save what I can, and hope for the best.
Yeah, there is a policy where if you work 3 days or more, then you get paid to scale in Scotland. You're quite right. But if you do just work a day or two, then you are getting paid at the very bottom rung of the ladder. So there's still...
And is that...
What was that?
Sorry, is that the same in England?
No, sorry, I teach in Edinburgh. I think mostly, I can't vouch for all of England, but most of the supply teachers I've talked to are working through agencies. And so half of the money that's given to you know, the head teachers are given to agencies, the agencies themselves are keeping, and they're giving the other half to supply teachers. Whereas with the council, it seems a lot more fair. You get paid to scale as long as you work 3 days or more. So there are differences throughout the country. I appreciate that. Thank you for answering those questions. I'll move on to the third question now. So somebody asked me, what should I bring with me to school if teachers have left no work for me? I may teach reception to year 6 and not know which class I'll have until I actually arrive at the school.
When I go into a school, I tend to bring a bag that has a bunch of easy art stuff that doesn't require any specific resources. I have a bunch of maths activities, a bunch of literacy tasks. And if you also have in your head a couple of websites which give a fun intro to things like full stops, or a fun intro to how to use an exclamation point or something like that, then it's quite easy to do a standalone lesson. If I'm dumped in it and I've brought the wrong work and I've changed to a different class suddenly, I can pull out of my head something like sentence tasks on homophones, to and to, where and were, and so on. And so I can do a lesson. And then once you've done something by magic a few times, then it's always there for you to go back to. It's never as difficult again. I think it is important if you arrive early, so that if you can find out which class you're going into, then at least you have half an hour or so to get your head around it. The worst thing for me is when the teacher has left very, very detailed plans, but they're really, really cryptic. Or actually, no, worst of all is when I'd been told what class I was taking, so I brought the stuff. Then I arrived at the school at 8:30, didn't get told. I got told that it wasn't the class I thought, didn't get told which class I was doing until about 3 minutes to 9. And then I was like, but all the stuff I brought, they've already done because I was here earlier in the week. So sometimes, I mean, I stopped going to that school because it was just such high stress, 3 minutes to work out what you're doing. But usually if you go to a school as early as possible, then it gives you a chance.
Great, thank you. A lot of points you've raised there that I can relate to completely, especially last minute changes. I think that happened to me just last week at 10 to 9. Suddenly I'm in a new class. having just prepared the last 40 minutes for a different class. So thank you for that.